So what we have got it. Let me try to fix that. Oh. Yeah, better. Okay. So, last part of the Vigrahavyāvartanī, which is dealing with the really difficult issues in Madhyamaka. The difficult issue in Madhyamaka is not emptiness, but is the consequences of emptiness, meaning what is left once one realizes that one for realize emptiness. So what we're talking about is conventional truth, conventional reality. What this is the difficult notion in Madhyamaka, not emptiness, but conventional truth or conventional reality. And let me refresh your memory. And this is chapter 24, which is one of the most important with chapter 1 and chapter 13 of the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā. And chapter 24 responds by talking about the two truths. The objector argues that what Nagarjuna is doing is negating the Four Noble Truths, karma, the four fruits, and everything. And the answer is going to be that this objection is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the two truths, and that the essential answer that Madhyamaka has to this kind of objection, that they are nihilist, is to say, no, you don't understand the two truths. And so the ultimate truth is very easy, because the ultimate truth is that there is no ultimate truth. And so that's a paradox. But once you wrap your head around the paradox, it's not that difficult to understand that it doesn't make sense to talk about or to think about how things are. And because that involves us in impossible contradiction. And this is what Nagarjuna demonstrates throughout his Mūlamadhyamakakārikā. And so emptiness is simply the fact that it doesn't make sense to talk about how things are in reality. All we should limit ourselves to is our transaction. And that's what is conventional truth. And so the question is, what does it mean, conventional truth? Is this a backdoor to reintroduce a notion of reality? Or is it just whatever we think and whatever we talk about is what is actually conventionally true or conventionally real? So this is a real problem. And last time, but let me repeat it, I flagged the point that Madhyamaka makes, which when they give etymologies of, this is on page 272 of the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, when they talk about conventional truth, conventional reality, page 272, they talk about three meanings of the word. One is concealing, the other is mutual dependency, and the third one is conduct of object of conventional behavior, object of language, object of the conduct of ordinary people. These are three meanings, right? And the first meaning is in tension with the second and the third. In the first meaning is that conventional truth is not true, it's false. Because things appear to us as being real, but ultimately they're not real because they're not findable under ultimate analysis. So things appear to be real, things appear to exist in reality, to exist as they appear to us, but they don't. And so this appearance is deceptive. So that's why it says concealing. Conventional truth, meaning conventional reality, conceals its true nature, which is that it doesn't have a true nature. And so you may be tempted when you hear that conventional truth conceals its true nature to think of it as just falsity. But that would be falling into the extreme of non-existence. And so that's not what Nagarjuna has in mind. And so you maybe start to understand the tension that there is in the concept on conventional truth, which means something false and something dependent arising. And it's like, yeah, the two don't go together. And yet this is what conventional truth means, conventional reality means, right? Something which arises dependently, but something which is at the same time false, because it pretends to be as it appears to us, and the reality is that it does not it does not exist as it appears to us, right? And so the ultimate truth is that there is no ultimate truth, meaning we can think in our mind many different alternatives, as it's done in the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, and then we realize that, yeah, there is no conceivable way in which we can make sense of how things are. And so we should stick to appearances which are deceptive, but not completely non-existent either. And that's the teaching of the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, right? I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's relatively contained, right? Yeah, once you learn how to make the round, you get an idea. At first, it's very disorienting because it's built on a paradox, but after a while, you understand with the two truths. And the most difficult to understand is the conventional truth, conventional reality, which is both false and dependently originated as well. And these two pull apart, right? Are contradictory. Okay, that's the easy part. Now comes the difficult part, which is what the Vigrahavyāvartanī deals with, which is, if this is the case, what kind of semantic can we have if it doesn't make sense to think about how things are? If the reality of things is that they don't have a reality, what kind of semantic can we have? And this is what we talked about last time. And by semantic, I'm referring to the meaningfulness of language, right? Language is meaningful, and language meaningfulness depends on a variety of factors. And obviously, this is a huge topic in Indian philosophy. And one objection from the Nayayika is that if things are empty, then it's hard to understand how language is meaningful, given that it seems to be arbitrary. And so this is one objection that the Nayayika realist has against Madhyamaka. The arbitrariness is that under this Madhyamaka view, language seems to be arbitrary, meaning the meaning of language seems to be arbitrary. You know, when my students when I tell my students, your answer is not the right answer, this is the right answer, my student answer, oh, this is what I meant. Sorry, no. Language is not arbitrary. You didn't say that, you didn't mean that, and so you don't get an A. And that's talking about meaningfulness of language, right? Now, tonight we are going to deal with a much, no, more, I don't know, I wouldn't say more difficult, but equally important, equally central consideration, which is we're going to talk about pramana, means of, valid means of cognition, valid cognition. There are many translations. And this is an essential notion of Indian philosophy. And this is what most of the Vigrahavyāvartanī, at least part of the Vigrahavyāvartanī, talks about, right? It talks about pramana. And so after that, we are going to look at that. And after that, we can look at the Svatantrika, Prasangika distinction, which is about the nature of pramana, which is what kind of pramana can Madhyamaka have? And the debate is very easy to understand because everybody, I assume, understands pramana, right? And the essence of the debate is going to be if it doesn't make sense to, it doesn't make sense to think things about as they are in reality, what does it mean to have a pramana? What does it mean in our modern English language? What does it mean to have knowledge? Usually people think that knowledge is some kind of correspondence between a mental state and how things are, right? But if we say how things are is nonsense, it's a contradiction in term, then how do we demarcate knowledge from bullshit? And that's what the Vigrahavyāvartanī is trying to answer. This is the second heavy topic that is dealt with Nagarjuna. And we'll see Nagarjuna's answer is fairly radical. And obviously, then commentators are going to deal with that, commentators such as Bhavaviveka and Chandrakirti. And so this is what we need to talk about tonight. So this is heavy stuff. So let's talk about Nagarjuna first, because, okay, so I am reading Bhattacharya translation of the Vigrahavyāvartanī. I have not checked what Westerhoff, but I assume they are more or less the same. So last time we talked about the semantic objection that the Nayayika have against Nagarjuna. This was stanza 1 to 3 of the Vigrahavyāvartanī. And now we're going to talk about the epistemological objection, the objection that if it doesn't make sense to think about how things are, how do we distinguish? pramana from non-pramana. And that's what we're talking about. So on page 99, under number 5 in Roman number, now, if you say that you deny the things after having apprehended them through perception, we reply that perception through which the things are apprehended does not exist. So this is against the Nayayika, who says, you argue that all phenomena are empty, therefore pratyaksha, perception, which is the first and foremost pramana, is empty, meaning does not exist as well. And so that perception through which the things are apprehended does not exist. And so how can you prove anything at all if you don't have any perception and any inference and so on, right? To this we reply under number 6, in our refutation of perception, we have already refuted inference, verbal testimony, and comparison. So these are the 4 types of pramana of the Nyaya school, right? Perception, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony. Now, it doesn't matter that there are 2 or 4. What matters is this idea that the Nayayika is going to try to adduce a contradiction in basically in Nagarjuna's method, right? The Nayayika method is what I would call the pramana method. And the pramana method means that for any statement that you make, your opponent will ask you, what is the pramana on which your statement rests? And so it can be pratyaksha, perception, it can be inference, and so on, right? Now, if all things are empty, pramanas are empty as well, and so you don't have pramanas, and therefore your statement does not have any support. And so why should we believe it, right? So this is talking about pramana and the pramana method, which is the basis of doing philosophy in classical India. So when you do philosophy in classical India, people ask you, on which pramana do you base your statement, right? And you say, well, I have an inference. And so you state the inference, and then your opponent will try to take it apart, right? And that's how people did philosophy in ancient India, right? So this is called the pramana method. And so to have the pramana method, when Nagarjuna says all things are empty, presumably he's a respectable Indian philosopher, and so he should follow the pramana method, right? And so the adversary asked him, hey, how can you make this statement? You say that everything empty, and so the pramanas are empty as well, and so your view has no support, is not supported by any pramana, right? That's going to be the Nyaya objection. Everybody is on board? As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. It's in a way based always with the self-referentiality that we talked about last time, right? And it pertains to the pramana method, and therefore For Madhyamaka, it pertains to the way in which the method that they use to establish emptiness, right? And that's what is going to be at issue between Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti. What is the method that you follow to establish emptiness, right? And I wouldn't say the trouble, but what is going to differ with this, with Bhava Viveka, is that he's going to try to make Madhyamaka respectable. And so he's going to introduce pramana into Madhyamaka. If we look just at the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, there is no mention of pramana, and the method that Nagarjuna used is not the pramana method. It is a kind of prasanga method, which is just drawing absurd or contradictory consequences from statements made by the adversary, right? That's Nagarjuna's method. I see your hand.
Professor Dreyfus, yes, I just had a comment. You know, I don't know what Nagarjuna is going to say, but I was listening.
This is what we are going to look at.
Right. I understand. But, you know, just to share something, right? When they teach us about emptiness, you know, they say that up until the path of seeing, your understanding of emptiness is going to be inferential. Yeah. And then after the path of seeing, there's yogic direct perception. Yeah, and so it's direct perception.
Yeah, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about yogic direct perception. We're talking about inference.
Well, fair. But
so the question is whether there is inference or not in Madhyamaka, and what kind of inference exists in Madhyamaka. Because in order to have an inference, you need to have pramanas, right? And so that's going to be the issue. And so the issue is exactly inference. That's a central issue that's going to divide Svatantrika from Prasangika. They have the same view. They both understand that the ultimate truth is that there is no ultimate truth. That's the easy part. The hard part is what kind of method do we use to establish emptiness? That's going to be the difficult part that divides Prasangika from Svatantrika. Everybody understands that the names are Tibetan creations, right? They are not Indian creations. Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti never suggested that they were different sub-school of Madhyamaka. They both saw themselves as students, followers of Nagarjuna, and they thought that, and Chandrakirti thought that Bhava Viveka was wrong to introduce inference in Madhyamaka and to introduce syllogism in Madhyamaka, and this is what they were arguing about. But before we go there, we need to see what Nagarjuna says, because Nagarjuna will surprise you. So I'm looking at verse or stanza 30 on page 114, in which refutation of the Nyaya objection. If I apprehended something with the help of perception, etc., then I would either affirm or deny But since that thing does not exist, I am not to blame. This is obviously the same thing as the stanza 29, in which Nagarjuna said, if I had a thesis, I would be blameworthy, but since I don't have a thesis, I don't have any fault, right? This is the same kind of move. And then on the next page, if such and such object I establish for you through the pramana, tell me how those pramana are established for you. So the foundation of the pramana method is that you have 2 or 4 types of pramana. That's not such a big deal. And then question is, okay, pramana are the tools of valid cognition, or valid tools of cognition, valid instruments of cognition. And the question is, if you think that objects need to be validated by pramana, what does validate pramana? Do we have an infinite regress, or is there a stopping point at which this necessity to validate stops? And so if such and such objects I establish for you through the pramana, tell me how those pramana are established for you. Then on stanza 32, if the pramana is established through other pramana, there is an infinite series, regress. Neither the beginning nor the middle nor the end can then be established, because any pramana establishing another pramana needs in turn to be validated by a third pramana. And so this is an infinite regress. Now on the next page, now if you think that both pramana established without further any other pramana, then your philosophical position is abandoned. Meaning, you told me that for my statement to make sense, they need to be grounded on some pramana. But then I ask you what those pramana are grounded on, and you tell me they don't need to be grounded. And so your view that anything need to be grounded in a further pramana falls to the side, right? And so the point is established that we don't need things to be established by pramanas. This is 33. And then at the bottom of the page, it says, the opponent replied, the pramana established themselves as well as other things. Fire illuminates itself as well as other things. Likewise, the pramana established themselves as well as other things. And Nagarjuna responds, this is a defective position. Fire does not illuminate itself, for its non-perception is non-seen to be comparable with a part in darkness. So this is famous passage in which basically Nagarjuna refutes 2 positions, right? One position is that pramana are validated by other pramanas, which is the Nyaya position. And then the other position is that pramana are self-validating, right? Which is the position of the Vedanta, certainly, and the Buddhist like Dharmakirti. And so now, obviously, Nagarjuna is not addressing Dharmakirti or Vedanta. Well, Vedanta, we don't know, but certainly not Dharmakirti, but he's addressing some kind of philosopher who argues that cognition is self-revealing, right? And that is the other position that is refuting. So, what is Nagarjuna's view about pramana?
Same as his view about everything else.
But it's empty.
Yeah.
Do pramanas exist conventionally?
Yes.
Why? Show me a passage in the text in which Nagarjuna says that.
No, Nagarjuna doesn't say that, but the Nyayas say that.
Oh, the Nyaya say all kind of, for the Nyaya, everything is real. So the Nyaya, we don't have any problem.
So you're saying, I'm sorry, you're saying that Nagarjuna doesn't even it says that the pramanas don't even exist conventionally.
The Nagarjuna just refutes pramana, right?
Got it.
There is nothing else in the text. I mean, we could go on. You got the gist. And Nagarjuna just refute pramana. And so the question is, what do we make of this? And this is obviously what the commentators, such as Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti, are going to talk about, right? But I just wanted you to see that Nagarjuna himself doesn't talk anything at all about pramana except to refute them, right? This is the only thing he says. Now, it's...
Professor?
Yeah.
But Nagarjuna is only refuting pramana if you assert that pramana is based in any kind of corresponding to reality.
Maybe. I mean, we don't know, right? We don't know. I mean, you're right to say that Nagarjuna's enterprise is to refute certain views, right? And so, except on chapter 24, when he tells us something, he never tells us anything kind of, yeah, but things exist conventionally, right? Only chapter 24 tells us this, right? And so in here, Nagarjuna does not tell us what he thinks of the pramana, right?
Doesn't you know?
Do they exist conventionally? And what does it mean for pramana to exist conventionally, right? This is a difficult point of Madhyamaka. The rest is easy.
But Professor, I think just now and also last class you were referring to one of those famous Nagarjuna's famous verse where someone says, well, then you have nothing to say at all, and he says, but I'm not, that my words have meaning because I'm not grounding them in any intrinsic view. So isn't that indirectly saying that he believes in some conventional pramana?
Maybe. The question is, what does it mean in a Madhyamaka context for a cognition to be a pramana?
I was just sorry. I mean, if you look at the argument, in I guess 2 points that in 31 at least to 33 at least. I mean, it's all on Nyaya terms. There's no. He's not like Nagarjuna is not. He's just saying your view doesn't work on your own terms. So he doesn't really say anything about pramanas. But at the same time, the arguments he's using don't seem to require any sort like anything that things are empty. These would work. I mean, the regress, those problems would come up with just about any.
Exactly.
Any sort of.
But this is the Madhyamaka method, right? This is Nagarjuna's method. Nagarjuna's method is not the pramana method. It's this other method that you don't try to prove anything. You just take apart, deconstruct the position of other of opponents, right? And Indian, well, Nyaya obviously are going to call Nagarjuna's method Vitanda, which is basically sophistry. It's like not respectable philosophy because it doesn't have the backing of any pramana, right? And for Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna does not try to have the backing of any pramana, right? So you're right, it's not about emptiness. I mean, it's related to emptiness, but not directly, right? What it is basically is the use of this deconstructive method to take apart the epistemology and the semantics of the Nyaya, right? And other school as well, right? And so that's Nagarjuna, right? And so commentators are going to try to make things a little bit to fill in what is not explained in Nagarjuna, right? And they are going to do it with, I mean, they are going to have slightly different view, right? And the difference that is going to happen is a difference about pramana, right? That's the most difficult notion of Madhyamaka. The rest is easy, is not difficult. Pramana is really difficult because if it doesn't make sense about two things, to think about things, to think about statement in terms of how they capture how things are, how do we adjudicate, how we differentiate what's a true statement from what is a false statement? And that seemed to be one problem. Second problem, how do we argue for Madhyamaka against the other school? Now, so two questions. One is pramana, second is the method that Madhyamaka should follow. Nagarjuna seemed to be pretty clear that you should just stick to the Madhyamaka method, right? Which is this deconstructive method, which takes apart statement from other schools and doesn't try to prove anything at all, right? And when the people accuse you of nihilism, you say, oh no, things exist conventionally. What we're talking about is the various ideas about how things are in reality, right? That's Nagarjuna.
But he does he anywhere do I'm just thinking in the Mūlamadhyamakakārikās, excuse me, he there's this sort of the sort of more, I mean, not positive chapters, but with like the Four Noble Truth chapters where he says, no, you kind of need, those don't make sense without things being empty. And so it's sort of this positive thing, like, yes, I still can, but he never just, is there any passages where he kind of does a similar thing with pramanas or some other sort of epistle? Like the only way you can make sense of knowledge is if things are empty. I don't think.
Oh yeah, but he refutes a view of other school.
Yeah.
But he never puts a positive statement.
Yeah.
Does in chapter 24, right, where he does come out and say, no, things are not non-existent; they exist conventionally. And then he never says what conventionally means. And then it's up to commentators such as Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti to say, well, conventionally means concealing, meaning deceptive, and dependent arising, and object of conventional designation. These are the commentators who come with that. Nagarjuna never says what he means by that, right? Similarly, commentators come up with a kind of try to think about how we are going to argue for Madhyamaka in the context of Indian philosophy. Because Nagarjuna is kind of seen by many of his, I wouldn't say contemporary, but people who follow him as a kind of sophist, right? And so commentators are going to try to make it a little bit more reputable. And so Bhava Viveka is going to introduce inference into Madhyamaka, right? And you're going to get reasonings that prove emptiness. I mean, prove is a strong word, but I should say established emptiness, right? And so these reasonings presuppose that it makes sense to talk about pramanas, right? And they are going to establish emptiness. Now, Bhava Viveka is quite clear that the reasonings do not establish emptiness itself, meaning ultimate truth, which is only the object of yogic perception, but establish what is called proximate emptiness, which is emptiness as can be understood from an inferential point of view, from an inferential perspective. And so that's going to be Bhava Viveka's, if you want to say, innovation, right? Introduction of Indian logic into Madhyamaka using the Prayoga model, the idea of what people call Indian syllogism of the form, the sound is impermanent because it's produced. So people are going to have reasoning like the sprout is empty because it is neither one nor many, no different from its parts, right? And then as the mirage, and so this is going to be something. It is a proper Indian syllogism, right? It's a prayoga. And so this is the introduction. This is introduced by Bhava Viveka. And so Chandrakirti is going to say, no, you cannot do that. You're betraying Nagarjuna's method by introducing Indian logic into the Madhyamaka system, by introducing prayoga, arguments of the kind that I just stated, argument that seeks to establish a thesis, right? Remember Nagarjuna say, I don't have a thesis. I'm not trying to establish anything. I'm just showing the faults of various positions, right? That's what Nagarjuna does. What if we ask him, do you think we should have prayoga? God knows what, or Buddha knows what Nagarjuna would say, right? But obviously that question is complete nonsense because Nagarjuna is Nagarjuna because he lived in his own time, right? And so 3 centuries later, you have Bhava Viveka, who first takes to task Buddha Palita for commenting in a very traditional way on Madhyamaka, meaning just following what Nagarjuna did. And then Bhava Viveka argued, no, we should have our own reasonings that establish emptiness, though he knows that you cannot really establish emptiness. You establish what he calls, what later commentator, I don't know whether he used that, but what some people call proximate ultimate or metaphoric ultimate, which is emptiness as understood from a conceptual point of view. And then Chandrakirti is going to say, this is not okay because you're betraying Nagarjuna's method. You're introducing Indian logic in trying to establish emptiness, and emptiness cannot be established by a pramana. Now, Chandrakirti is going to be asked, do you accept pramanas? And then Chandrakirti is going to make weak gestures towards, yeah, and you know, we can talk about the 4 pramanas that the Nyaya accepts. But he seemed to not to want to use inference when dealing with emptiness. And so the question is, what is the status of this pramana? How do we distinguish pramana from wrong cognition? And Chandrakirti's answer is basically loka prasita, which means what is established by the world, jikten latrakpa. And that's his answer. Basically, what is pramana is what is recognized by the world as being pramana. That's Chandrakirti's answer. Chandrakirti is a little bit less radical than his Tibetan translator, Patsap Nimatra, who will go all the way down and say, no, we don't accept pramana. Madhyamaka should not accept pramana. We should stick to Nagarjuna's original method. Chandrakirti is a little bit more moderate and say, okay, if you want pramana, I give you the pramana of the Nyaya, and what distinguishes a pramana from the non-pramana is that is basically what is established by the world. So he takes, if you want, the word conventional in the literal sense of the word, right? For Chandrakirti, what is conventionally true is what is accepted by the world. Now, what that means? Well, interesting question. The Bhava Viveka thinks that Madhyamaka need, or people later following Bhava Viveka, like Chandrakshita and Kamalashila, if we reconstruct the position, they want to have a more robust idea of pramana. And so they are going to say, no, it's not just what the world, what is renowned to the world, but there are more objective criteria, such as causality, that allows us to distinguish what is conventionally true, real, from what is completely false. And that's a distinction between Svatantrika and Prasangika, so-called, which is really the distinction between Chandrakirti and Bhava Viveka and Bhava Viveka followers. And you should all be aware that in India, the enormous majority of, until about the 10th century, everybody basically followed Bhava Viveka, and Chandrakirti, I wouldn't say was a nobody, but yeah, pretty much. And then from the 9th, 10th century, things seem to have changed in Kashmir. And so Chandrakirti seem to have been more considered, and therefore Tibetans got introduced to Chandrakirti via people like Patsapnimadra, who went to Kashmir to learn about Buddhism and translate texts. And so this is where the Svatantrika Prasangika distinction comes from. You had a question?
I just, I'm very confused now about Pramana and Madhyamaka because
Yes, because you have listened to Gelugpa teachers who
yep,
give you the Gelugpa interpretation of the Svatantrika Prasangika distinction. And that's a version. I mean, the accusation against the Gelugpa, against Tsongkhapa, which I think is not unfounded, is that Tsongkhapa should have declared himself a Svatantrika, and then all the mess would have been solved.
yeah, because I mean,
Yes,
because from the very
Tsongkhapa
beginning,
looks very much like a Svatantrika.
yeah,
Right.
because
The
from the
reality.
very, sorry,
No, go ahead. Now,
I was going to say because when
you look back, but that's if you look at the text, that's what you see, and that's what Gorampa says of Tsongkhapa, that is Svatantrika. And if Tsongkhapa has said, I am a Svatantrika, the whole mess would have been solved. We would never talk because, yeah, there is a small difference between the two. It's not the difference about ultimate truth. It's a difference about conventional truth, whether we take really seriously the pramana method or not. That's
right. But now when you speak about it, I'm thinking that from the very beginning, when I started studying Buddhist philosophy, in Madhyamaka, they always tell you that, some objects cannot be directly perceived, they can only be inferred. Emptiness is one of those things. And when you do like the Chandrakirti sevenfold chariot analysis and, Tsongkhapa's, that's all inference.
Yeah, kind of. Now,
Right?
Chandrakirti's commitment to inference is interesting. It's a complicated topic. For Tsongkhapa, it's absolutely inference, no question. I mean, it's hardcore inference, right?
Right.
Yeah,
so that,
no question. Yeah.
So I'm very puzzled now by this whole debate about inference within Madhyamaka. Like it seems like pramana is accepted and is used.
Well, you understand that it's a very difficult topic because the question is what distinguishes a pramana from a non-pramana, right? And the usual answer is that pramana, the cognition is a pramana if it captures things as they are. Once this answer is impossible, then you need to give criteria for what distinguishes pramana from non-pramana, right? And interestingly enough, Tsongkhapa, because Tsongkhapa really believes in pramana. Tsongkhapa really believes in pramana. Now, conventionally existing, obviously, there is no funny business there. Tsongkhapa is a good Madhyamika in good standing. No, that's not in question. But Tsongkhapa believe like hardcore pramana, right? And so, yeah.
But I also don't follow the argument.
And so he's very much in line with the Svatantrika approach, which says, yeah, we should use pramana, that we should make robust. And Tsongkhapa even give criteria to distinguish pramana from non-pramana. And basically he talks about what is uncontradicted by other pramana as the main criteria to distinguish, which is a good criteria. I mean, if you really believe in pramana, that's an excellent criteria. And that shows the degree to which pramana is important for Tsongkhapa, right?
But I also don't follow the argument of Chandrakirti against Bhava Viveka. You know,
Well, yeah,
I mean, just because you don't follow Nagarjuna doesn't mean your method is wrong.
well, yeah, well, okay, delicate question, because Nagarjuna is supposed to be the person you follow if you're a Madhyamaka, right? So that's one point. The second point is that there is two questions. There is a question of pramana in general, and then there is a question of pramana regarding emptiness. And so these are somewhat different questions. So pramana regarding emptiness, we're talking about inference, right? And so what we're talking is Bhava Viveka introducing a prayoga, an Indian syllogism, to establish emptiness, to establish that all things are empty, right? And so in using a prayoga, Bhava Viveka commit himself to the existence of the subject of the argument and the example of the argument. And that's where Chandrakirti attacks him by saying that as a Madhyamaka, you cannot assert, you cannot establish the subject, because establishing the subject is through pramana contradicts the very thing that you're trying to do, which is to unestablish the subject, right? The subject is the subject of the reasoning. The reasoning is the chariot is empty because it's neither one nor different from its parts, as is, I don't know, the mirage, the illusion, whatever. And so in that reasoning, you provide the subject, the chariot, and you provide an example, the mirage, the illusion. And so providing a subject for Chandrakirti means that the subject is established by inference, is it established by pramana, and that for Chandrakirti contradicts the very thing that you're trying to do with the reasoning proving emptiness. Now, you may have qualm as to, was Chandrakirti really well-founded to make this objection? Because it looks like Bhava Viveka is going to have a relatively easy answer, but that's a debate between Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti. And then Chandrakirti is going to be asked, don't you accept pramana? And then he's going to say, yeah, we follow the world, meaning the Nyaya, and we accept pramana simply on the basis of loka prasiddha, meaning what the world established, meaning believed, right? That's Chandrakirti.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I think I have a lot more thinking to do. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my view is really different from, I mean, I'm not really a Gelugpa, but for me, all Tibetan schools, I mean, Gelugpa and Kagyu and Nyingma basically have similar views of emptiness. Where they differ is their views about conventional truth. And this difference basically parallels the difference between Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti. And my understanding is that when Tsongkhapa understands Chandrakirti to be saying that Bhava Viveka is contradicting Madhyamaka, he is really doing a number That is, he's not stating fairly what Bhava Viveka believes. Rather, he's kind of forcing his conclusion onto Bhava Viveka, because my view is that Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti have exactly the same view of emptiness. There is no difference. The difference is a difference in the method to establish emptiness and in difference in the strength of your commitment to pramana. And this is, for me, the distinction between Chandrakirti and Bhava Viveka.
Because I've also heard teachers say that not only is a distinction in the method, but also the Svatantrika have, you know, they accept true existence conventionally, but reject intrinsic.
Let's talk about.
Okay.
They accept intrinsic existence, but not true existence.
Right,
But
the other way, yes.
to me, that's, and even Jeffrey Hopkins agree with that. So that's pretty staunch Gelugpa supporter, is that Tsongkhapa is doing a number. It's that he's not stating fairly what Svatantrika position is. He's rather forcing his conclusion onto the Svatantrika position, which he should really not do, because in reality, his view of Madhyamaka agrees more with Svatantrika than Prasangika, because he has a pretty robust commitment to pramanas. But you have to understand that Tsongkhapa happens in a semantic field, which is already determined, in which Prasangika is seen by Tibetans since the 12th century as the superior school. And so Tsongkhapa just continues that view, because in Tibet, at first there were debates between what is a better interpretation of Madhyamaka. And for example, Chapa Chökyi Sengye was a proponent of Svatantrika, but he was probably 11th or 12th century. But by the 13th century, basically all Tibetans think that the superior view is Prasangika. And so Tsongkhapa happens in a period in which everybody is trying to be a Prasangika, and for Tsongkhapa to say, "Oh, I'm not a Prasangika," would be would be seen as by others as uncool. So
Tsongkhapa's,
because we know that Prasangika is a superior view, right? That's what Tibetan teachers, all Tibetan teachers, except a few, will tell you, right? Yeah, this is the established view since the 13th century. So Tsongkhapa happens at the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th century. And so he's like, yeah.
would you say Tsongkhapa's teacher, Master Randava, was also Prasangika?
I have not read Randava, but most Tibet, for example, I read extensively Gorompa and Shakya Chokden. They are more Prasangika than Tsongkhapa in my estimation. But they also say that it doesn't matter because the view of the ultimate is the same. So they fault Tsongkhapa to be a Svatantrika, while at the same time saying doesn't really matter. Tsongkhapa was wrong to believe there is a strong difference between Svatantrika and Prasangika, which in a way undermined the criticism of Tsongkhapa, because if it's okay to be, if the view of emptiness is the same for Svatantrika and Prasangika, it doesn't really matter which one of the two you are, right? And the Svatantrika answer is to the Chandrakirti debate is that obviously we should not think that the reasoning establishing emptiness established the real emptiness. It established only the metaphorical ultimate, the metaphorical emptiness, which is emptiness as understood conceptually, right? And so the Svatantrika would say we have no fault because our view, our introducing inference into Madhyamaka is just a skillful means. It's just a good way to try to get people to understand conceptually emptiness. And after that, obviously, you have to be serious and meditate and try to understand emptiness through yogic perception, right? Okay, any more questions?
Sorry, couldn't Chandrakirti, I mean, or Bhavaveka could just say to Chandrakirti, like, listen, like, I just need to do this so we can convince some people in the philosophical schools, and we're all going to throw away the ladder out in the end anyway. So who who cares? I mean, you just, if it's, it also, in some ways, I guess would be the question: to what extent is like conventional truth and skillful means?
No,
really.
It's more than a skillful. Well, I'm a Svatantrika, so it's more than a skillful means, in my view, because I think we do have to find the way to. I think Tsongkhapa is right to try to find criteria distinguishing what is BS from what is true, however we qualify. So at the end of the day, I side with Tsongkhapa, and I think that no, conventional truth is not just a skillful means. And Tsongkhapa is absolutely right to try to say we should cherish, we should value conventionalities, right? Because that's all what we have. Because if we do not value conventionality, then there is nothing at all, right? And then you have the spectrum of nihilism. And so I think I just would wish that Tsongkhapa would come out, maybe in my dream, and say, George, you're right. I am a Svatantrika, but I cannot say that because it would freak out so many people. But this is not going to happen, I think. Any more questions? Okay, so I guess that's all for that set of classes, right?
Oh, in that case, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
So I wanted to, I still am a bit confused about Nagarjuna's argument about the relationship between cause and effect. And, is it a relationship of identity and difference? And then when we said, sorry?
It's neither that, neither one nor the other.
Right, but in understanding the argument for difference, so I think one of the things you said was, how do you then tell what is a cause from a non-cause?
Yeah, right? It's the same thing we talked about today.
Right, but let's say, you're a farmer, that if you plant a tomato seed, you are not going to get cucumbers.
Yes.
Right? So then as a farmer, wouldn't you be right in thinking that
absolutely
there is a relationship between?
And so here's the question. Why is a farmer right? Is it because he's backed by genetic, which is Bhava Viveka's view, which is the Svatantrika view, which is Tsongkhapa's view? Or is it just because it's known to the world that if you want to have a harvest, you need to plant seeds, which is Chandrakirti's view and maybe Kurampa and Shakya Chogden? That's your question. That's a difference between Svatantrika and Prasangika. What's going on when farmers plant seeds? Is it because this is warranted by genetic, agronomy, and all the different forms of knowledge? Or is it just loka prasiddha? It's just known to the world, but
wouldn't
if
you
you want
say,
to harvest, you need to plant seeds.
but wouldn't you say that originally that relationship was made by observation? Like initially nobody knew when they planted the seed what they would get, and they planted
Yes,
it and they saw what they got. And
remember, I'm a Svatantrika, so I would say, obviously, it's agronomy, which is here the answer, not simply what the world, what is renowned to the world, right? But, you know, that's two interesting answers, right? You can see that these answers differ on not on any kind of ontology of what the world is like, but they differ on how strong commitment they have to the idea of knowledge, right? Which in the Indian context is the idea of pramana, right?
but where I was going with this was, for the farmer, wouldn't the farmer say that the tomato seed has swabhava? It has its own nature because only it produces tomatoes.
Yeah, but that's just dependent arising, right? That's just observation of the world, right?
Okay.
Now, yeah. Now the question becomes a bit trickier if you think that there is a definite scientific answer for why certain seed produce certain harvest, right? And then you would go probably into genetic, and then you can ask the question, isn't that some kind of swabhava, right? Which is not because it's a blueprint, but it gets a little bit closer to an idea of some kind of intrinsic property, right? So you see the debate between Svatantrika and Prasangika mirrors a debate about in the philosophy of science between people who think between different forms of anti-realist view of science. And it all comes to the account that we want to give of knowledge, right? What differentiates knowledge from non-knowledge? And that's the difficult question of Madhyamaka.
Thank you. And I think Richard has a question.
Yeah, it's probably a question that follows up on the discussion you've been having with Sneh, and which has been fascinating. And you know, it basically gets to the last thing that you said, Professor, which is essentially how can you tell knowledge from non-knowledge, or knowledge from BS, as you said earlier. And I'm not sure I can put it in exactly the right terms, but here's the thing that I'm trying to figure out. The farmer plants the seeds, fair enough, puts them in the ground and waters them. But then the planter also sacrifices a goat after he plants the seeds, or she plants the seeds. And lo and behold, tomatoes come up.
Yeah.
And okay. How does he tell? How does the farmer tell which are the actual causes and which are non-causes?
Yeah, this is why I am a Svatantrika, because I think there is a way to distinguish causes from non-causes, and a way which is not just loka prasiddha, which is not just what is renowned to the world. Because in fact, you would say in 2nd century India, sacrificing a ghost seemed to be a good cause to have a good harvest, right? And obviously, we understand that this is not true. Why we understand that is not true? Because we have a better understanding of the relevant causal relation, And that's why I think a convincing Madhyamaka account of conventional truth should be based on causality, because that's the main way in which we distinguish true statement from complete BS, right? Now, what does that mean to have a causal relation? Well, that's also going to be complicated, because we don't think that when there is a question whether we are reintroducing svabhava,
Mhm.
intrinsix nature, by the back door, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the worry that, in a way, Tsongkhapa has. So this is not a trip. This is why the dispute between Svatantrika and Prasangika is a really serious philosophical dispute, which goes to the heart of the central issue, the central, not issue, the central difficulty in Madhyamaka, which is pramana, the status of pramana. How do we distinguish pramana from non-pramana? That's the most difficult issue. And that's not me who is saying that. That's my main teacher in Madhyamaka, who was intensely respected by the Dalai Lama himself as being the best of proponent of Madhyamaka. And this is what he said. This is the most difficult issue.
Can you recommend some books to follow up on this, on the difference between, on how to distinguish pramana from non-pramana? It's a question that I just keep on coming back to, and in my own small way, just keep on banging my head against it, and I'm just not getting anywhere.
Send me an email, then I will look what I have, because yeah.
It's a very difficult question, and it's a very interesting one too. So
yeah, I think Tom Tillemans. Yeah, I will recommend you some work by Tom Tillemans.
Tom Tilleman. Okay.
But send me an email and I will send you the reference.
Thanks. I will.
Anything else?
Hi,
Otherwise,
Professor
I will
Dreyfus.
take
Yes,
my-
this is Suvanch. I had a question. So,
Yeah, please.
what, you've been talking about pramana, but we didn't go into the issue of self-awareness. And
No, because
go ahead.
yes, we didn't go into that, because Nagarjuna does not accept self-awareness.
And that runs counter. Does it not run counter to what we hear in the Nyingma teachings?
Well, yes and no. Now, self-awareness is a huge topic of Indian philosophy. Nagarjuna is clearly refuting self-awareness, so there is no reason to think that he would accept it. Then you have 4 centuries later, or now 3 centuries later, you have Dignaga, and then a century later, Dharmakirti, who is going to introduce self-awareness, right? Self-cognition as one of the pramana, right? As one of the types of pratyaksha, perception. And so now in Dharmakirti, and well, Dignaga, I wouldn't say I don't know enough about Dignaga, but in Dharmakirti, I'm supposed to know enough about Dharmakirti since I wrote a book about him. So in Dharmakirti, self-cognition is at the service of an epistemological program, which goes against Madhyamaka. I mean, it is the idea of self-validation, right? And that's an epistemological program, which is different from the Madhyamaka program. Now, things get more complicated once Madhyamaka, some Madhyamikas accept Svasamvedana, self-cognition, into their own systems. And so that opens a new venue of inquiry. My view is very simple. And I don't know if that's a view of Shantideva, but I think it works with Shantideva. Not sure this is completely accurate to him, but basically it's the idea of putting Yogacara and Madhyamaka together. What do I mean by that? How Madhyamaka is in charge of the ultimate. The ultimate is that there is no ultimate truth. What's Yogacara doing? Yogacara is talking about conventional truth. Now you may think, what is he talking about? Because you think that Yogacara is an idealist school which denies external objects. Now, they may have done that, but there is a perfectly reasonable way to understand Yogacara as basically a kind of phenomenology, meaning a description of what appeared to us. And so when you understand Yogacara as a phenomenology, you understand that self-cognition is not to be understood in an epistemological project, is not in charge of validating a kind of foundation, an attempt to find foundation for knowledge, but is simply an account of what it means to be aware of what appears to me. And when you take that self-cognition in that way, I think it's totally unobjectionable to any Madhyamaka argument, because it's just saying this is appearance. I'm not making any ontological claim. I am not making any epistemological claim. I am not trying to find foundation. I'm just trying to account how things appear to me. And how things appear to me is that when things appear to me, I seem to be in some way aware that things appear to me. And that's what self-cognition is. Now, that's a kind of philosophical account that I give of self-cognition in the Madhyamaka context, because I think it's true to the phenomenology of consciousness, which has been explored by phenomenologists like Husserl, Merleau-Ponty, and others. And I think Yogacara view can be understood without twisting text, pretty much in the same way. And so if you think Madhyamaka plus Yogacara, that is a great Buddhist view. And that's a very solid Buddhist account of the ultimate truth and the conventional truth. And so in that perspective, we accept self-cognition as just a way to account for appearances, right? Now, in the Nyingma Kagyu, another school, some people have an understanding that is probably relatively similar, then other people have give more ontological way to self-cognition, and then connect this with the practice of Tantra and the realization of clear light, and so on. And some people think this has an ontological status, some people do not think so. So it's getting much, much more complicated and mixed in with a lot of other things like Tantra and so on. So if we just stick to the philosophy and make it quote unquote simple, I think we can have a fairly good account of conventional truth if we accept self-cognition, and that's all what it is.
Okay, thank you.
That's my view. Obviously, that's not Tsongkhapa's view. As you can see, I have a mixed take on Tsongkhapa, because I think if he had called himself Svatantrika, we would be in great shape. I still would have liked him to accept Svasabvedana, self-cognition on the conventional level, but One cannot have everything in life. Anything more?
I have another. Oh, sorry, Catherine does.
You are muted.
About the references, about Tanteran's work, can you send the references to us in general, or just?
Yes, so Sneh can send me an email of all the people, and I will send a reference.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're in charge of collecting all the email. And when you send me one email, and I will send a group email.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Professor Dreyfus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Please come back again and teach us.
Okay. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Excellent class.
Thank you, Sunny. Bye-bye.
Where shall we put the on the chat, the emails? Is that the best way?
I have your
Oh, yeah.
emails, Catherine, because you all signed up.
Okay, fine. Then
So
it's
I will just get it from the system and send it to Professor Dreyfus.
perfect.
Venerable Tendril, are you signed up too? Would I have your email in the system?
Yeah, I did sign up. Yeah.
Okay, then I have everyone's email and I will send a group, I will send them all to him and then he'll send a group email.
Super.
Thank you. And I'll do it now so I don't forget.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Very
you.
appreciated.
Good
Bye
night.
bye.
Bye. Thanks, Sunny.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for the organization.